Floating 500 kilometers above Earth, Alexei Leonov realizes he's going to die. His spacesuit has ballooned like a deadly marshmallow, and he can't fit back through the airlock. He has minutes of oxygen left. His partner can't help him. Ground control can't save him. Nobody on Earth even knows he's dying because Soviet TV is broadcasting a pre-recorded victory message while their hero suffocates in space. This is the real story of humanity's first spacewalk. 12 minutes of glory that nearly ended in the most horrific death imaginable. A truth hidden for decades. On March 18, 1965, while America focused on the moon, the Soviet Union was attempting something unprecedented, sending a human outside a spacecraft into the void. There was no safety net, no precedent, and no second chances. What history books often omit is that this mission was dangerously rushed. NASA had been working on their spacewalk program for 3 years. When Soviet intelligence learned America's Ed White would walk in May 1965, chief designer Sergei Korolev moved the Soviet attempt to March. They would beat the Americans by weeks, even if it cost a cosmonaut's life. The man chosen for this potential suicide mission was Alexei Leonov, a former fighter pilot from Siberia. He was an artist who painted his dreams of space. He was also considered expendable. The Soviet space program had a simple, brutal philosophy. Heroes were replaceable, but victories were not. Leonov's training was rudimentary. He practiced in a swimming pool and in a modified aircraft that flew parabolic arcs to create 30 seconds of weightlessness. His spacesuit, the Berkut, was tested exactly once with a human inside, and that human wasn't Leonov. The mission was a gamble from the start. The Voskhod 2 was a death trap, disguised as a spacecraft. It was a modified Vostok capsule, designed for one cosmonaut but now crammed with 2. It had an inflatable airlock that looked like a fabric tumor, no escape tower, and no backup systems. This airlock, called Volga, was made of rubber and cloth, deploying like the world's most dangerous balloon animal. Leonov's crewmate was Pavel Belyayev, a war hero who had survived being shot down in 1945. His resilience was about to be tested in ways he could never have imagined. The morning of the launch, something surreal happened. The cosmonauts were driven to the pad in a bus playing Elvis Presley, decadent Western music that was technically banned in the USSR. As Leonov climbed into the capsule, he found himself humming "Love Me Tender." The Soviet Union's greatest technological moment would have a secret American soundtrack. At 11:32 a.m. Moscow time, Belyayev activated the airlock inflation. It extended 3 meters from the spacecraft. Leonov checked his suit, his tethers, and his courage. At 11:34, he opened the outer hatch and pushed himself into nothing. "I gently pulled myself out," Leonov recalled, "and before me was the black sky, stars, and the blinding sun." He was the first human being to see Earth without a window, with nothing between him and infinity except a few millimeters of rubberized fabric. What the cameras couldn't capture was the silence. In space, silence is an aggressive presence. Leonov could hear his own heart beating and his breath rushing in his ears while the universe remained devastatingly mute. For 5 minutes, everything was perfect as he somersaulted against the cosmos. Then, physics intervened. In the vacuum of space, his suit began expanding. The pressure difference between the suit's interior and the void caused it to balloon uncontrollably. His hands pulled away from his gloves, and his feet floated free inside his boots. The very suit that was keeping him alive was now becoming his coffin. At the 8-minute mark, Leonov tried to re-enter the airlock. He couldn't bend his arms. His inflated suit wouldn't fit through the 1.2-meter opening. Each failed attempt used precious oxygen and brought him closer to a lonely, terrifying death. Ground control couldn't help. They could hear his labored breathing but didn't understand the problem. Soviet mission protocol forbade discussing failures on open channels, as the Americans were listening. So, Leonov said nothing about his impending death. He made a decision that should have killed him. Without telling anyone, he opened a valve on his suit, bleeding out precious oxygen to reduce the pressure. This was explicitly forbidden. The suit began to shrink, but now he was experiencing decompression sickness. The bends. Nitrogen bubbles formed in his blood, his vision blurred, and his joints screamed in agony. With his suit partially deflated, Leonov tried again, entering the airlock head first, another violation of protocol. He was supposed to enter feet first to close the outer hatch. Now, he was wedged in a fabric tube, unable to turn around. The temperature inside his suit hit 35 degrees C. Sweat pooled in his gloves, and his visor fogged completely. Blind and suffocating, he somehow managed to contort his body, turn around, and pull the outer hatch shut. He had been outside for 12 minutes and 9 seconds. He had survived the spacewalk, but the mission's drama was just beginning. As Belyayev pressurized the airlock, he noticed something terrifying. The spacecraft itself was losing pressure. Somewhere, Voskhod 2 was bleeding its own air into space. The life support system overcompensated, flooding the cabin with pure oxygen. A single spark from any instrument would have turned the capsule into a Roman candle, incinerating them both instantly. The two cosmonauts sat perfectly still, afraid that any movement might create a fatal spark of static electricity. Then, a new alarm sounded. The automatic re-entry system had failed completely. They were on their own. Belyayev would have to manually pilot a spacecraft traveling at 28,000 kilometers per hour into a precise re-entry corridor. If he was too steep, they'd burn up. Too shallow, they'd bounce off the atmosphere into an endless orbit. He had 90 seconds to perform calculations that normally took hours, using only a pencil and paper while falling around Earth. Belyayev fired the retro rockets, but the service module failed to separate. Voskhod 2 began spinning violently, pulling 10 Gs. Blood vessels burst in their eyes. After 10 agonizing minutes, the module explosively tore away. Voskhod 2 crashed into the Ural Mountains 2,000 kilometers from their intended landing site. They landed in 3 meters of snow in temperatures of -25°C, in a wilderness locals called the Land of Bears and Wolves. The re-entry forces had warped the hatch shut. They were trapped. After 2 hours, they forced it open with a survival knife and climbed out into a forest full of aggressive wildlife during mating season. Their first radio message was simply, "We're alive, somewhere in Russia, probably." Moscow had no idea where they were. As night fell, Leonov and Belyayev realized nobody was coming soon. They couldn't stay in the freezing capsule or light a fire. They had a pistol with 9 rounds to defend themselves against bears and wolves. They spent the first night standing back to back, taking turns staying awake, listening to the predators howl around them. The next morning, a rescue helicopter found them, but couldn't land in the dense forest. A ski team finally arrived that evening, but orders from Moscow were clear. The cosmonauts couldn't be evacuated until a proper recovery team arrived. Image mattered more than safety. They spent a second night in the forest, now with a tent, but still surrounded by danger. On the third day, they skied 9 kilometers to a clearing where helicopters could finally land them. The Soviet press, meanwhile, reported a perfect landing in a predetermined area with immediate recovery. The truth of their terrifying ordeal was hidden from the world. Leonov was punished for surviving wrong and didn't fly in space again for 10 years. He finally returned in 1975 for the Apollo-Soyuz mission, where American astronauts hailed him as a hero. Pavel Belyayev never flew again. The immense stress of the mission damaged his health, and he died 5 years later from peritonitis, a hero forgotten because his heroism involved saving the mission after everything went wrong. His manual re-entry saved both their lives, but manual re-entries weren't supposed to be necessary in the glorious Soviet space program. The Berkut spacesuit that nearly killed Leonov is now in a museum, looking harmless behind glass. Visitors don't know that he had nightmares about it for years, waking up feeling it inflate, crushing and suffocating him once more. Alexei Leonov's spacewalk lasted 12 minutes. The mission nearly killed him 17 different ways. For decades, the world only knew the sanitized version of a brave cosmonaut's triumphant return. The truth is so much more human. A man stepped into nothing with faulty equipment because his country needed a victory. He survived through desperation and genius, proving humans could walk in space by nearly proving they couldn't. Every spacewalk since, over 400 of them, uses lessons learned from Leonov's near-death. He wrote the manual with his suffering,